Hey everybody, welcome into this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you as always by tutvid.com. You saw the title up there. I'm not quite sure what I'm calling this tutorial yet, so you have to rely on that title for some accuracy, but here's an example of what we're making. And you can see that it's this kind of animated, glittery letter effect. It's pretty cool. It's entirely done in Photoshop. It looks really sweet, I think at least. And if you do enjoy the tutorial, make sure you hit the little like button and also make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss another Photoshop tutorial in the future. And if you also are not maybe on YouTube as much, you can hit me up on Instagram. I'm at tutvid. I'm trying to build a little bit of a following over there and just have a nice little community where we share different things. And you can always, find and see a lot of the new, at the very least, Photoshop and Illustrator tutorials. I like to pretty much try to post most of those over there as well. But we're really starting to do some interesting things over on Instagram at tutvid, like I said. And also, as I usually mention at the beginning of these videos, support the channel by picking up a copy of my Photoshop course. It's all about how to retouch images in Photoshop. Picking it up using the link that just appeared there in the top of the video. Best way to support the channel and what we're doing here. So with all of that out of the way, let's check out this effect, and I have it just here kind of looping in the QuickTime player, but if I get out of that, and if I close my QuickTime player, if I can manage that, there we go. Here's the Photoshop document. Now, it's actually a relatively simple effect to create. It just requires some timing and finesse and things like that, and a couple little creative solutions, but here's how we do it. First things first, File, New, and I'm going to go with my standard. I like to work with a 2560 by 1440 file. Go ahead and hit Create to create that new document. And the first thing I'm going to do here is add a solid color adjustment layer. So I can hit this little half white, half black icon here on the bottom of my layers panel. Choose solid color. I'm going to choose a black. That's great. And I can just hold down my Alt or Option key, double click my background layer, and drag it to the garbage. So this black layer is now our background layer. And the nice thing about it is I can always double click on the color fill and quickly change the color if we decide we want to try to go with a different color at some point. So just keeping our options open is kind of what I'm interested in. Next up, we're going to grab our text tool. And I want to go with, I'm going to go with the Arial black font because it's a fairly universal font. Most people have it. The general idea here is you just want some big, bold font. That's it. Really, any font will work. I could have gone with Sonder Sans. You can go with a Bernier. You can pick any number of fonts. Just go to a free font website. Find something that's big and bold. Arial black is a nice one to go with. I'm going with a size of 1200 points. And a fill of white in this case, just kind of so I can see it. But I'm just going to type out a letter that I want to create this glitter effect with. I'm going to go with N because my name is Nathaniel, so N kind of kicks things off there at the beginning of my name. And what we want to do here is go ahead and align this to our document by going Select All, and then up here you can see in our control bar all these alignment options activate as long as we're using our Move tool, the top tool there in the toolbar. We're going to align vertical and horizontal there, and then we can go select, deselect to get rid of our selection. Now, we're actually going to sort of hide the N, but we're going to use it to create a stroke. So we're going to go Layer, Layer Style, Stroke, and you can choose any color stroke you like. I'm not going to go with white. I'm going to go with like a blue. So I'll go with like some kind of blue, and it doesn't really need to be 9 pixels. I'm going to go with like 2, and everything else can just be what it is. None of that really matters. And then we'll come over here to Blending Options, right up here, Blending Options, and we'll just reduce the fill opacity of this layer to 0. So what that's going to do is going to get rid of all of the white of the text and just reveal our stroke. You can see it's the same as just reducing the fill opacity out here in the Layers panel. So now that we've done that, we need to go ahead and begin creating a vast series of circles. And the way that I like to do this, or the way that's just kind of straightforward, is to grab the Ellipse tool. It's located here underneath your Rectangle tool, Ellipse tool, and a couple things here. We want to make sure that we're drawing a shape layer. So we want these to be vector shapes. Shape layer, great. We'll set the fill here to white. And I'm going to click once, and it's going to say, hey, look, you'd like to create an ellipse. What do you want the width and height to be? I'm going to begin with my largest ellipses, which are going to be 30 pixels by 30 pixels. Hit OK, and you can see we have a nice little white ellipse right down there. Now, all we need to do is scatter this guy all throughout the outline we created, and maybe even a little on the actual edge of the outline. And we do this by holding down our Alt or Option key and just dragging out copies of this shape, and just throw them around. They can literally go anywhere. We're really going to build this effect. You'll see when we layer on additional ellipse sizes, and you really could go with even additional shapes, but we're going to try to kind of remain somewhat simple here with these 30 pixel by 30 pixel ellipses. And I know over here in the layers panel, things look kind of hectic. It's a bunch of ellipse 1. Resist the temptation to grab all these and group them up. We're going to have kind of a unique way of grouping these, and we're going to do that in just a moment. Let's go back to the ellipse tool now, and we're going to create a 20 pixel by 20 pixel ellipse. And now we're going to do the same thing. Move this ellipse into place and just scatter a few of these around. You do want to resist the urge to put too many ellipses in there, and what is too many, I don't know. Just as you kind of build this effect, you'll know when you see the final result that like, whoa, I way overdid it, or hey, I just didn't place enough. All right, that's probably enough for the 20 pixel by 20 pixel. Let's go with some 15 by 15 pixel ellipses. There we go. I grab the move tool, bring this guy over, hold down Alt or Option, just drag it and throw it. And I'm not even really trying to land at any specific place. I'm just taking my hand and just winging it and letting the dot sort of fall where it may. And that's going to, see there, it's maybe a little tight, so I'll just stretch that out. And, we're just slowly building this effect. If I scroll down and I shut off the letter N, it's loosely resembling the letter N. We need to fill it out a little bit more to really get some definition. We got 3 more sizes of ellipses to create, so we're going to go with an 8 by 8. So there we go, 8 by 8, and this is pretty small, but we're going to go even smaller. And I'm going to throw some of these guys around. And you can see, as we do this, the effect just kind of makes itself, right? And one thing I would say too is don't worry if you throw a dot like this dot I have way out here outside of the outline. We're going to end up masking this effect in, so don't be too worried if you throw one out somewhere and, I got to find it here in my ellipse stack and go get it. Don't even worry about it. All right, let's create yet another ellipse. This one's going to be a 4 by 4, so we're getting even smaller. We're going to drag this guy in here and then start scattering this around like some fine dust. There we go. Great. And last but not least, we're going to do a 2 by 2 ellipse, which is very tiny indeed, but it just comes across almost like a little, a star that's hanging out way back there in space. So we're going to have a really nice mixture of size and shape. Well, not really shapes, but size dots that are effectively changing the shape itself. And you'll see that all of these ellipses are going to be the base of a pretty cool layer style when we go ahead and do that. All right, I'm going to scroll all the way back down. If we shut off our outline, you can tell now it looks much more like the letter N, but maybe still not quite enough. That'll all be helped as the animation works its way out and we mask these ellipses to this shape itself. So we'll shut off the outline here for the letter N layer, and we need to begin grouping these ellipses into sort of usable, animatable shapes, because right now it's just a huge number of shapes that would take forever to animate. So here's how we're going to do it. This is kind of cool. We're going to grab our path selection tool here, and the default up here is probably select active layers, but that would require us to actually select the shape layer which we want to select. Instead, we're going to change this to all layers. This is going to allow me to simply draw a selection over a chunk of our shapes, and it's going to select just those layers. So if I scroll through my layers panel, you can see I'm just getting these shapes selected and none of the others. Obviously, that's very helpful and is going to save us a ton of time. Because what we want to do here is just right-click on any one of these shapes, and we want to choose this option here, Unite Shapes. Maybe something you've never used before in Photoshop. Go ahead and click that, and what's going to happen is, if we scroll back through our layers, all of these shapes are now grouped into one layer, this ellipse 6. So if I shut that layer off, see that they all disappear. I turn it on, hey, they're all there. Before I lose this layer, I'm going to right-click on it, or not right-click on it, excuse me, double-click on it, and I'm just going to name it Leftmost, because these are all the shapes all the way to the left. And in fact, I'm going to come up here and go Layer, Arrange, Bring to Front. So that's going to bring this layer all the way to the top of our stack. We don't have to drag it all the way up. If I shut it off, it is in fact all of those little dots. I also want to right-click on this layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. This is going to help us when it comes time to animate, just because of the way vector shapes animate versus just a standard object. And the Smart Object allows us to preserve the vectorness of those shapes while having a little bit of an easier object to animate. So we convert that to a Smart Object. All right, I am going to shut this layer off, so I'm just going to hit the little eyeball icon there. Great. And with my path selection tool, I'm going to just grab a chunk of these dots here in the middle, something like that. Again, I'll right-click, Unite Shapes, find that layer in the stack, and we can see it looks like they didn't unite. If I scroll down, I can see, yep, definitely didn't unite. Let's try that again. Let's right-click, choose Unite Shapes. There we go. They should all be in this one layer now. Double-click, and I'll just name this Left because they're kind of, they're off to the left, but they're not the leftmost. And again, we'll go Layer, Arrange, bring this to the front as well. And in fact, I'll drag it down below leftmost. We'll right-click on this and convert that to a Smart Object. Shut that layer off. Voila. All right, let's take our path selection tool again here, and I'm going to grab all of these shapes, there, and I'll probably also grab this one little dot down here just because it looks like it kind of belongs. I'll right click, go unite shapes. I'll make sure that they're all united. Yep, looks like that. That one worked out just fine. This one's going to be called right, and again, layer, arrange. You get the point here, right? Bring this to the front, drag it down beneath, just leftmost, left, right, and right click on this, and convert that to a smart object as well. And of course, last but not least, just grab all the remaining little circles, right click, unite those shapes. Say that pulls them all into a nice tight little package. We're going to go rightmost. We don't need to move the layer at all. Right click, convert to smart object. Voila. And it looks like the shapes got smaller, but it's just because it deselected all of the paths. You didn't lose anything. So we have rightmost, right, left, and leftmost to make up our letter. What we now need to do is mask each of these smart objects to the original shape of the letter N. So we're going to hold down our Command or Control key and click. We're going to click right on the letter T, the layer thumbnail for that text layer. Command or Control click loads it as a selection. I have the rightmost layer selected in my Layers panel, and I'm going to go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection. So it's going to hide all the black stuff is hidden, and just the white is what you're going to see. Now there's this little chain link between the layer thumbnail and the mask. Just select that chain link. It's going to disconnect the layer from the mask. It might help us out later on. I want to keep that option open. And now all we need to do is hold down our Alt or Option key, click and drag this layer up, up, and up. And just like that, we've trimmed all of our dots, all of the edges and everything, so they fit nicely within this selection. And now that we've done all of that, here's where the animation begins. We go up here to Window and choose the Timeline option. Let's go ahead and hit Timeline, and up pops our timeline. And the first thing it presents us with is an option here. Create video timeline or create frame animation. We definitely want to go with the video timeline in this case. You can switch back and forth, but it's just better to get it right the first time. Up here under by the flyout menu over here, we want to change the timeline from 30 frames per second, right? You see that marker, 30 FPS? We want to change that to 60 frames per second. So hit the little flyout menu here and go set timeline frame rate. We're going to change this guy using the drop-down menu to a standard or somewhat standard 60 frames per second. And by the way, up here you can go convert frames, and that would be how you convert to a frame animation, and so on and so forth. So what we have here is a playhead, this little blue thing, and that just shows us where we are in our animation. We're right at 0 frames right now, and this little time marker down here also tells us, look, you're at just 0, 0, 0, 0 across the board. Great. We want to begin by animating the leftmost layer, and notice when I select the leftmost layer, not only selects it in the timeline, but it does select it up here in the Layers panel. We're going to use this little arrow here to the left of the word leftmost, aptly, and hit this option down here, Style. We have all these different things we can animate, but we're concerned with the style of this layer. I'm going to click on this little stopwatch. That gives me what is called a keyframe, this little yellow diamond. Now that just indicates that I've dropped a keyframe at the point at which my playhead is right now. My playhead right now is at 0 frames, therefore I get a keyframe at 0 frames. Now, the importance of keyframes is they're like stopping points. So if we want to animate and make these dots really big, just check this out. With the style, we can do something like this. Or maybe we want to give it a glow. Let's do this. Let's give it a glow. We go here, and we drag up here to, like, I don't know, 15, 16 frames. We're at 16 frames, right? You see that? And we add another keyframe by clicking on that little diamond, right? We've added another keyframe. We have that keyframe selected. That's where we are in the timeline. We can go up here to Layer. Remember, we're still working on our leftmost layer. Layer Style. Outer glow, and let's say we want these things to really sparkle. Let's give them like a crazy, I don't know, red outer glow or something. Make the opacity 100%, something that's really noticeable. Maybe we should go light green instead. There we go. It's a little bit more noticeable, and with a size of like something absurd, 30, 29, 30. Hit OK. So now what's going to happen is Photoshop says, all right, at this point at 16 frames, there's a bright green outer glow, but back here at 0, you kind of have this keyframe that doesn't have anything on it. So therefore, Photoshop automatically tweens an animation between those two keyframes. So between keyframe 1 and keyframe 2, Photoshop does all the animating heavy lifting. I'm going to undo that outer glow because it's a little absurd, and let's instead, in fact, I'm going to drag a selection over that keyframe and delete the keyframe straight up. What we want to do is place a keyframe by double-clicking on our timeline down here. We want to place a keyframe at 15 frames, and it's as simple as just typing in the number 15. And Photoshop knows you want to go to 15 keyframes. Voila! Come over here, hit the Add New Keyframe option, and we're going to double-click on this layer, the leftmost layer, out in this blank area to the right of the word leftmost. Double-click, and we're going to choose to add a stroke here. So I'm just going to click Add Stroke, and you can see it says massive blue stroke. Not at all what I want. I want to choose from the color picker the color white, right? And I want the size to be pretty low. We're going to start with a 3-pixel stroke. Positioning needs to be outside. A blend mode of normal is perfect, and opacity of 100% is just fine. We're going to hit OK, and we've began the process of scaling these circles larger. Now I need to create another keyframe. I'm going to double click on my time marker. I want to create this keyframe at 30 frames. So we bump out to 30 frames. We do the same song and dance, add a keyframe, double click on the little FX icon there, right? And we already have a stroke. All we need to do is adjust the size of the stroke. We're going to push it up to 7 pixels. So we're going to make it quite a bit larger. And now we can see here, just if we take a little test spin, we're animating up to 3 and then jumping up to 7. We need to go further though. This isn't good enough. We're going to double click on our time marker again, and this time I'm going to jump up to 55 frames. Hit OK, and I'm almost at 1 second. We have a 60 frame per second animation here. And I'm going to go ahead and add another keyframe here. And now just notice we are spacing these keyframes out. And part of the reason is because I want the effect to go from absolutely no stroke to a pretty heavy stroke in about a half second. And then take almost the next half second to fade to the final state of the stroke. So if I double click up here on that FX again, go stroke, I'm going to boost the size of the stroke to about 9 pixels. And then I will hit OK. So it's almost creating a sort of ease out effect where it really begins fast and then just slowly fades to the last and final size of that shape. And of course, now that we've faded up to 9 pixels, it's time to fade back down to 0. So we're going to add another keyframe at 1 second and 20 frames. It's pretty simple. Just go 120. And Photoshop knows you want 1 second plus 20 frames. Voila. Add a keyframe. We're going to double click over there on the FX icon, back to stroke, just downsize it to 7. Voila. Easy as it goes. Double click on the time again. Now we want to go to 1 second and 45 frames. And by the way, you can totally do this by eye. I just have it kind of planned out so I can mow through it a little faster. Add a keyframe. Double click on the FX icon, choose stroke. We're going to knock it down now to 3, and we want to take it all the way back to 0. So we're also going to jump up. I'm going to double click on time. I'm going to go to 2 seconds and 10 frames, 210. There we are. Add a keyframe. And all I need to do is double click on the FX here and just select that little check to just get rid of the stroke, hit OK. And now what we have is we have an animation that goes up and then back down. Voila. And what it does is it goes up pretty quickly, holds a little bit toward the top, and then just slowly fades away over the next sort of second, a little over a second. Now that we have the initial timing down, it all gets, I don't want to say easy, but a little bit easier. Maybe a little less thought has to go into it, but it's still a little tedious. But here's what happens. Basically, we have all of our animation positions set up. So I'm going to twirl down the left layer, and once more here under Style, I'm going to choose to add a keyframe for this layer. And then all I need to do is select my leftmost layer, and use this little arrow right here. It's going to tell me that's going to jump me to the next keyframe, right? So I'm in the exact same position, and then I can just hit the add keyframe here for my left layer. I can choose jump to the next keyframe, add a new keyframe, jump to the next keyframe, add a new keyframe, jump to the next keyframe, add a new keyframe, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. And then all I need to do is now I can use the go to previous keyframe. I can just animate in the stroke that I need. So on this keyframe, I double click on my left layer, I add a stroke, and what was my first stroke? 3 pixels, great. I jump to the next keyframe, double click, I'm going to add a stroke, and this stroke jumps up to 7 pixels here. I'm going to go to the next keyframe, I'm going to double click to add a stroke, and this stroke jumps all the way up to 9 pixels, right? That's kind of the peak of our stroke. And then over here, we're going to double click, we're going to add a 7-pixel stroke because we're kind of coming back down now. Go to the next keyframe, whoop, make sure you double click out in the open area, a stroke, 3 pixel, and then last but not least, fade it out to absolutely 0 by just leaving the stroke the way it is. Now, let's just quickly scrub through this, make sure it looks right. Everything's moving up and down in unison just perfectly. All right, and basically I'm going to speed the video up here because you're going to do the same thing with the right and rightmost layers, and I'll be back in a second to show you how to mix up the timing and really make things interesting. All right, there we go. I've just gone ahead and placed all of the keyframes. In fact, I can use my little view slider down here at the bottom of the timeline, and I can just zoom out a little bit so I can see a little bit more of my timeline. And everything looks great. In fact, I'm going to collapse my timeline panel just a little bit here, and let's try to scrub through this. And basically, we should see everything getting larger and then smaller, just in complete unison. Great. So now what we need to do is decide when each stage needs to begin and end. So I obviously know that I want to begin with the leftmost area getting much larger. So what I'll do here is we'll just pick, like, I don't know, 30 frames per second. Let's just double click on our little timer here, and I'm going to go 30 to take me to 30 frames per second. And I'm going to drag a selection over my keyframes here on the left layer. So you can see they're all yellow. That means they're all selected. So selected all of them. Now, when you draw a selection, I should give you a heads up. It doesn't really look like you're dragging a selection because nothing appears, but just drag over an area and you'll see that it selects everything. And we'll just click these keyframes and drag them all the way up and align them at 30 frames per second there. And you'll see here that that second stage will have sort of a delayed start. So then, of course, let's just double click on our timer. Let's go to 60 frames. And let's drag the next grouping of keyframes down here for the right layer. Let's drag these guys so they start at 60 frames, right? Something like that. And then we'll go to 130. So we'll go 1 second plus 30 frames. And we'll drag all these guys down here at the very bottom all the way over so they get started at sort of 1.5 seconds. All right, I'm going to collapse all these layers real quick just so we can watch the playhead do its thing here. So I'm going to go left, I'm going to collapse left if I can, and leftmost. All right, great. So now I'll move the timeline layer down a little bit more as well. We've got our N up here, and let's just watch it. Let's see what happens as we scrub through this. You can see left begins, then the stage next to it begins, and the stage next to it, and then the stage next to it, and they all fade right out. So you hit the space bar, you can kind of get a preview of what it looks like here in Photoshop. And there it is, just like that. So what I'm going to do now to make sure that I'm exporting the right amount of this as a video or an animation, I'm going to come over here to the rightmost layer because that is where kind of the animation stops, right here at 3 seconds and 40 frames. And I'm going to drag this slider right here, this little slider right beneath 5 seconds. I'm going to drag that guy right back to the 3 second 40 frame mark because that's sort of my active work area. This is the area which we're going to export. We're going to export it here by, again, choosing from the little flyout menu in the animation timeline, or the Photoshop timeline, I should say. We're going to go and choose Render Video. You see that? Render Video. I'm going to select that, and you've got a bunch of different options you can choose here in the Render Video dialog when it appears. Here we go. You can choose where you want to save it. I'm just going to save it right here. You can see on my desktop, but you can hit the Select Folder or the Browse button, save where you like. Let's name this, Nglow Animation-Rect is fine, and you can choose how you're going to export this. I'm going to use Adobe Media Encoder. I'm going to export it as a QuickTime movie. Preset, sure, I'll just go with animation, high quality. That's great. Document size of 2560 by 1440 works for me. It is that 16:9 ratio, 60 frames per second. Beautiful. And then down here, the range. So you can choose to export all frames or just start and end at a very specific frame. Or I set my work area. So we're going to export 219 frames, which is exactly what we have here. And then you have some additional render options, which we don't really need to worry about in this case. And I'm just going to go ahead and choose the render button, let Photoshop do its thing, and we'll check out the finished product here in just a moment. All right, great. Looks like it exported. At this point, you could even close the timeline if you're just sick of seeing it in the way there. Close. We got our nice, beautiful letter. I can just go ahead and save my document, but I can also jump out to my desktop here. And there's our animation. Just double click to open it up, and it's probably a little bit larger than my screen. Let's go view. Go view, enter full screen. There it is. And then just play through it, and we'll see a little bit more of a high-quality version of what we've gotten. There we go. Looks pretty good. And what you could even do is, if I come back up here to view, we could loop it and really see what it looks like on a loop and make sure that it's really working. So it just kind of fades across, and then it just brightens back up and fades across. And you can do all kinds of things with it at this point, I should say. You could go ahead, you could add some outer glow to these dots. You could add some sparkle to the dots. If they're different shapes, maybe they're diamonds, you could add a little rotation to them. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do with these type of letter-based animations, or really they're shape-based animations that we're forcing within the confines of a letter would be the best way to put it. But I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, make sure you like the tutorial. Make sure you follow me on Instagram as well, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another one of these tutorials in the future. Oh, and you know what? If you do use this effect and you have something that you love, upload the video that you render out, upload it to Instagram, tag me in it in some way, shape, or form. I would love to see what you create. There's tons of people that tag me in all kinds of different stuff on Instagram every day, and I love seeing the stuff you guys are creating. So if you create some type of letter or word animation using this effect, I would love to see it. Oh, yes, I would love to see it. For creating a sweeping, glowing, multiple dot animating, sparkling animation in Photoshop using all kinds of different tools. Guys, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, touchvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.